everyone, and we are back with what is now the final episode of Jamdani Weeks. And today I have somebody whose name is quite synonymous with Jamdani, at least in Bengal, Darshan Shah. I just discovered in the course of our conversation that she and I are both lawyers by training, but she's left the law far behind, unlike me, and has been working in the last 28 years as a textile entrepreneur. I think most people know her as a very credible voice when it comes to particularly jamdanis, because she's been working with handcrafted textiles for a very, very long time. She has a quite an enviable personal collection of vintage textiles. She has a very deep understanding of jamdanis as they've evolved in Bengal. Welcome, Darshan.
Thank you. That was such a lovely introduction, and thank you for all those kind words.
So, in the course of Jamdani Weaves Week, we've heard a lot about the revival efforts that are happening in Bangladesh today. And I think you are a good person who will be able to give us a bird's eye view of the efforts that have been initiated in Bengal over the years in the area of Jamdanis.
To be very honest, in the last 28 years, I've probably worked more in Bangladesh and Jamdanis than in Bengal. But to come back to your question, yes, in Bengal is a very, very rich and strong heritage, and technically is extremely strong. Our weaving community, society is extremely strong in the technical aspect, not only of Jamdani, but as you know, many other textiles. Our spinners also have done a fantastic job of being able to spin that quality of yarn. Unless one has that quality of yarn and is able to spin different kinds of yarns, experimentation gets limited. So if we talk about a jamdani, whether it's a 60s counts, 80s, 100s, 120s, 200s, 300s, we've kind of have the yarns to create that. And then, of course, mixing it with different cottons, linens, and experimenting with silk, etc. They all may not be pure jamdani, but not only have each of the designers or the people who are working at grassroots who are from the technical background worked on jamdani in different clusters. So we've had very pure jamdani and muslin weaving, which could be said in Kalna. At the same time, in places like Fulya and Shantipur and other places, Murshidabad and other places, we've also had a lot of experimentation, is because we've had the Japanese come in, we've had foreigners come in, we've had a lot of influence of people who are designers who are working in Delhi, Jaipur, Bombay, etc., who've come in, people from NID, people from NIF, students coming and doing their projects. So there's been a lot of intervention in the Jamdani field. It was very interesting 4 to 5 years ago when everything had to be sustainable and handcrafted and socially aware and waste to wealth and all of that. That's when Jamdani really got one of the techniques that got a lot of importance was Jamdani, because it was, number one, not woven in such large quantities, and number two, it was handcrafted. Number three, we wanted to revisit it is because it was always in undivided Bengal, more in Bangladesh, that we always heard about the pure jamdanis. So experimentation is a lot on our side, and the purity still is retained on their side. So far, I would say that whether it's our designers, it's people like Pero, Injury. Firstly, I should mention the Japanese. Yogandale came to India, and first thing he went to Fulya and he started weaving basic simple colors and cross colors and natural dyes and checks and stripes, and then came into value add the Jamdani. All these inspirations, orders have made us not only experiment with the 6-yard, but have brought us to think about Jamdani differently. Whether it's in a curtain format, or it's in scarves, or it's in fabric form, and it's in garment form, it's got a lot of it's had the opportunity to go through a large gamut of interesting textiles, interesting people who connected with it. So yes, there was a lot of development, because at that point of time there was business. The last 1.5 years has been very tough, as we all know. And to be very honest, with all kinds of textiles, there are those good textiles and there are those not so good textiles. So Bengal had both. Bengal, it's not that, when somebody gets on the bandwagon and says, oh, Jamdani is doing well now, everybody gets on the bandwagon. Whether they've studied it, they know where the motives are coming from. They just kind of take everything, do whatever colors are popular. And you know, the Mahajans in the middle, they give them vague and rubbish designs and anything and everything. It could have been a Banarasi, it could have been a Upada, it could have been a, you know, any textile. And that formation of that design comes onto and making into a Jamdani. So it's not that we retain purity, but we definitely experimented for sure. And experimentation always leads to development.
I think what I'm hearing the folks say from across the border is that they're afraid that if we keep Jamdani limited to the 6 yard, it may not survive. And so the fact that we're well on our way there is always a good sign. So, I mean, coming back to the takeaways I've had from this, I think one of my first takeaway is that Bengal clearly seems to be producing superior quality yarn, which is not accessible in most cases to Bangladesh weavers. Bangladesh weavers appear to be making excellent and sometimes even superior, to be fair, techniques of, you know, the traditional weaving, the traditional butas, keeping that alive. The third is everyone's talking about lack of institutional support and financing. Because if you're talking about sustaining the sector, we're not only talking about sustaining the weavers or the master weavers who are at the front end, but the entire ecosystem, including a lot of the unrecognized labor by, say, women, which goes into the pre-weaving process. And there, you know, there's no minimum wage, there's no social security or any of that. So what are your thoughts on each of these takeaways, and what do you see?
Like I said, a couple of years ago, one more word that came up was sustainability. So when we talk about sustainability, the true success of being sustainable is to be able to manage to not have to have all the time asking for support or subsidies. Then you're not doing a fair way of doing any business or any pricing or any of that. Yes, there are lots of issues at grassroots at every level, whether it's our farmers or our weavers or whoever. But I feel that it's the responsibility of all those who are making Jamdani or who are making these textiles. It's important that they put in their understanding as well as their experience, as well as their wherewithal with markets and financials, you know, to be able to do the best they can. So today, if I want to weave a 300 counts Jamdani, but a museum design, it's very difficult in Bengal. I have to go across. And so I have to remember the fact that I have to take a 300 counts yarn, take it across. They don't even have good zari. So if I want to weave it in a good zari, I have to take the zari also across, find the master weavers, sit with them, make them understand. Language is the common factor. So Bengal definitely has a better hand. And if you speak Bengali and read and write Bengali, you are there. Whether you're working in Bangladesh or Bengal, it doesn't matter. And I never really believed in borders. If you want to make a good Jamdani, if you want to make good quality, if you want to do all of that, you definitely have to have the funding to do your research and development. You can't only be thinking about how I'm going to make money. If you're putting in that 100% of yours in every single part of that process, there were 16 processes, and you're putting that energy, that research, that development, the work, the documentation, the photography, the videography, explaining to your weavers, bringing them to the museum in Kolkata, elsewhere, showing them the textiles, collecting these textiles, making these examples, without which they've not been exposed to what you're talking about 150 years old, what we lost. Rivers have changed, routes, events have happened where people have migrated and cross-migrated, back migrations. There have been times when the actual silk and cotton yarn has been that was growing in a particular area, when grown in another area has given a different quality. So it's a lot of things that go into this study. It's not that easy just to say that how to make it sustainable. I find that the people like us, people like, you know, even other designers, they come and do one project. Next year, they're not there. So they are not the ones who sustain. Or you have students who come and do one project, 30 meters, gone. Any good textile has to sustain itself.
Through the Weaver Studio Resource Center, now you've undertaken a multi-year project to study the textiles of undivided Bengal, and we were talking about it earlier. Please tell us a little bit about the progress of the project so far, and do tell us particularly with reference to Jamdani.
Yes. Of course, undivided Bengal, if you list the number of textiles, there are almost 35 textiles. That was a revelation. Now, getting to study those textiles is what is the idea. Getting to study the history, the important events that changed the history of those textiles, that changed the place of those textiles, and the trade, the development, the important events, the movements, the zamindari, the British, the before that the Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, the Danes, the British, all of them came in, and they had different influences. To study each of them, from the Mughal Karkhanas to today, to say undivided Bengal times. So even if we're talking about almost up to today, to study this entire period and to be able to find the different narratives which we would like to present. It's a 4 to 5 year multi-year project, is because we're not sure about the pandemic. We're not sure about the venues at the moment. And we are into the first year ending, almost ending of our research, which is going on extremely well. We have on board our research associate, our project manager, our assistant project head, and we have an excellent mentor, Dr. Madhuvanti Ghosh from the Art Institute, Chicago. And we have many others on the academic board as well as the advisory committee. So we're going about it extremely systematically, and it'll take us time. We know we have huge challenges, but that's the beauty of doing this study. And on the Bangladesh side, also opening up. I hope that at the end of these 4 years, I'm able to make their government and our government do that one thing, is open up trade. You know, to not have that border for our textiles, because there was never it. So if I'm making 300 counts yarn, but they are weaving the jamdani, how can you separate it? You know, how can you separate it? So I don't know whether they will understand this, but I hope in the 4 to 5 years, my dream, and hopefully, I mean, this dream comes true. I don't know whether this is going to be my swan song, but I would, if it is my swan song, I would hope that every sector, segment that I'm working at in Undivided Bengal, not only Jamdani, but all those 35 textiles, some which exist, some which people have forgotten, some which are not in the right condition, or don't have the clusters, or don't have the people or the masters to continue making them. But we hope that all of this is revisited, and all of these from oral history to written history to documentation to gazette reports to trade to all of it gets recorded in a very comprehensive manner, is available on the public domain, and comes out beautifully in an international as well as national and cross-border exhibition, symposium, publication. That's the dream.
I think for those of us who missed the Jamdani Festival of 2019, we're all rooting for you. And we do hope your project reaches fruition in the way you visualize it, because I think it would be wonderful for those of us who are interested, who are starting out of this journey of research and interest. It would be absolutely wonderful. But in the process of doing this, Darshan, I think you've collected some pretty rare textiles yourself. So how did you go about, again, limiting our conversation to jamdanis? How did you source all these rare and interesting jamdanis? Tell us some stories. Are there any interesting stories around
just that
them?
when I started collecting textiles, I didn't know I was collecting them. I was collecting examples because I'm not from the textile background. So firstly, I started reading. Secondly, I started visiting masters, not in this country, everywhere, whether it was Japan, where I learned shibori, to batik, which I learned in Indonesia, to natural dyes, which I learned with Ruby Ghaznavi and with Sheila Balaji, who are my gurus. Except for Sheila Balaji, who is in India, Ruby Ghaznavi is in Bangladesh. And I continue to learn from all these masters. So I said my second effort was to go and travel and to understand textiles through the trade routes. So I started to go through the trade routes, and later I went through the other trade route, which is Europe, Africa, and all of that, Middle East, and of course UK, etc. So when I went to a certain village, or I was in my travels and I went to a certain antique shop, or went to suddenly bumped into a dealer, or people knew that I'm interested and would tell me that, oh, somebody has this and wants to sell it. Would you like to have a look at it? So whenever firstly, for the first 10 to 15 years of my business, I didn't have any extra funds. I was just about, sustaining, expanding, consolidating, sustaining, expanding, consolidating. I would go to somebody's home and there would be a small little piece that was lying on top of a thing, or there's a cushion cover, or there is a, maybe a rumal or a topi or anything that I found, I would collect it. Whatever came in my budget. I've seen hundreds and thousands of textiles, and I always wish now, when we had the funds, that, oh God, I wish I had the funds at that point of time, because they've probably been sold by Bartanwalis in exchange of buttons, or they've been probably, I don't know. I really don't know. Or they've probably been burned for the silver and gold. So it's very sad. And so same thing. So that's how my Jamdani collection, which is about 50 pieces of, if you combine everything from, a rumal to a topi to a jama to a sari to a dupatta, not really dupatta, but what men sometimes wore on their shoulder, to all of that. Um, they are beautiful. They are inspirational. They've been kept very well, but I continue to look for more.
Most people are really surprised by the fact that Bengal has never felt the need to apply for a GI tag for Jamdani. And Upada Jamdanis, are the only category of Jamdanis in India that have a GI tag. But equally, there is also the argument that what did the GI tag bring them? Because Upada Jamdanis aren't doing very well right now commercially. Do you see the utility of a GI tag or any other initiatives, whether it's a handloom mark or any of these initiatives, and what's your thought on
Firstly,
them?
for these kind of initiatives, it has to be the government in coordination with the Ministry of Textiles and the crafts councils who need to um, put it out there that this is the history of it. They need to do research. They need to bring in experts. They need to present their paper that why would a Bengal Jamdani, that is a West Bengal Jamdani, get the GI tag. So it's just that everybody is fighting for the GI tag, but does it matter to anybody? Today, if I'm making and selling a 2 lakh, 4 lakh, 5 lakh, 3 lakh, or 1 lakh rupee Jamdani, my buyer should have been discerning and saying that, and educated enough to say that, oh, I would like to see a handloom mark. I would like to see minimum wages or whatever that's called fair trade. I'd like to see a GI mark, etc. But nobody asks. They want a beautiful textile. And that's the end of that story. And what has the government done when they get the GI mark? How has the awareness been spread? Or how has there been any rules, regulations for selling that jamdani on an open counter? So it is for us, it's of no value.
I also hear a sense of concern where when you say that not everyone invests in Jamdanis, sort of on a long-term sustainable kind of basis. So people come, they do one project, and they go away. But is there sufficient interest that you see in Bengal overall for you to be hopeful for the future, or do you think we've hit saturation already?
We've reached mediocrity. And I think that word says it all. I don't know about saturation, that can be revived again. We've reached infighting, mediocrity. Social media has been like playing as much as good, as much as havoc. And uh, instead of being all the time constantly being competitive, if we would work better together as teams, I think we would achieve much more. If we learn from each other, if we share our resources, whether it's with the weavers, the marketing, the government, the designers, etc., selling, whatever platforms, it would definitely show a different side of it. And for now, where the quality is concerned, there's been no guidance. If what's the point of only 2 people making quality when 200 are not making quality, and everything is being accepted because of the price. So price has become a big issue. So we've reached mediocrity very quickly.
I think that's an important takeaway. I hope the right people are listening, and I hope it makes them think, because you're right. I think for a lot of buyers who don't bother to do enough research, it's the price points that help them determine that something is superior. And that isn't always the case. And I think for sellers and folks who are working in the business, it's not that hard to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to figure. And I hear a lot of these stories coming from Bengal with absolutely no antecedents about this revival project, that revival project, this muslin initiative, that initiative, all of which are essentially well packaged social media stories. So there's a great risk of that as well. And I think it's very, very important that people focus on the craft to take it outside of that mediocrity, and no better person to strike that very firm message than you, someone who's definitely earned her stripes in the field. So thank you very much. That was a very good, very hard hitting and important conversation, and I do hope the right people are listening.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this session. So I do see your complete dedication and interest to Jamdani and making all of us speak about it in a different context and bringing it to the public domain. And I'm sure that it will make a difference. So thank you for your time and thank you for initiating this. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much, Darshan. Really appreciate it.